to build jobs in America.
If the gentleman would yield,
Be happy to yield.
I'd pose a question back. What would you think about taking it to zero?
Taking it to zero.
Yes.
Why not take it to zero? Well, I'll tell you what I might hear back home. I say to my friend, and that's that, what do you want to do? Do you want to give business a free pass? Because my understanding is there are only two places we can get taxes. We can either take them from me or we can take them from McDonald's. And wouldn't I rather tax McDonald's than tax me?
Of course, we know, if the gentleman will yield,
Be happy to yield.
that the folks that are buying the food at McDonald's are going to pay the tax if we try to get it from McDonald's. And so we know that corporations don't pay taxes. They are aggregators of taxes that are paid by individuals, by consumers on the last stop. And so they're efficient aggregators of those taxes. They are actually the tax collectors on behalf of the federal government. The corporations that collect taxes don't pay them. They transfer it through. And by the way, they charge us for the $152 billion a year that it costs to comply with the federal tax code. And so I find it an act of frustration to seek to try to collect taxes from corporations when what I'm really doing is adding to the administrative costs for corporations, so they add the taxes and the administrative costs onto the cost of the goods that have to be competitive in this marketplace, and that makes it that individuals pay taxes, but it also means that jobs go overseas because corporations that are taxed in America are at a disadvantage to the corporations that are overseas who aren't very good aggregators of America's tax dollars, and so they have to raise the taxes here more. That's kind of the vision that I see that I would lay out here for the gentleman from Georgia, and it's we've got a long ways to go before America embraces the concept that I think will solve this problem, but I'd yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
But you asked the all-important question, I say to my friend, why not take the rate to zero? Why are we arguing about whether it ought to be 25 or 23? I just quoted the President of the United States. He said, let's make America the most competitive place in the world to do business. Well, if we lower it to 10, maybe somebody else is going to lower it to 9. If we lower it to 8, maybe somebody else lowers it to 7. What if we take it to zero? And I voiced my concern that, well, if you take it to zero, that means I, as the American consumer, have to pay all the taxes because corporations won't be paying taxes anymore. And what my friend who has years and years, decades and decades of experience in the private sector says is there's no secret drawer where American businesses get the money to pay taxes. I go out, I buy a Coca-Cola. Where does Coca-Cola get the money to pay taxes? They charge it to me in the price of the product. My friend is saying that the only taxpayer in America today is the American consumer. There is no other taxpayer. Businesses don't pay taxes. People pay taxes. Whether it's the CEO of that business who has a high salary and he pays taxes on his salary, whether it's the consumer of that business who pays in higher price, whether it's the shareholder of that business who pays through lower dividends and lower rates of return, why not take the corporate tax rate to zero to make sure the most competitive economy in the world? I yield to my friend.
Just to explore that just a little bit further, and that would be looking at the corporate tax structure. There's corporate income tax, and then there are all of the wages that are paid out in payroll taxes to the employees. And, of course, one of the most regressive taxes we have is the payroll tax. And so one might argue that, well, those taxes are paid by the corporation, that half of the payroll, that .0765 that I've multiplied so many times with the employees that I've had over the decades. And of course that .0765, which is half of the 15.3% in payroll tax, half comes out of the employer, half comes out of the employee. However, the half that comes out of the employer would be wages for the employee because it is a cost of doing business. It's a cost of competitiveness. And so when we add into the price of the goods and services provided by corporations, and I don't mean just corporations, they can be LLCs, they can be partnerships, sole proprietorships, you name it, a business entity that hires employees and or provides goods and services for retail market or supplies to those who do. All of that structure of their taxes is built into the price. And a fair amount of research brings us to a number that is generally considered to be about 22% of the retail price of goods and services sold in the United States as the tax component paid by the suppliers. They get it into the marketplace, and in the end, paid by the consumer. So those corporations that move overseas have a different tax structure, but those products that come in from overseas have a 28% marketing advantage over the products produced here in the United States because they don't have the burden of U.S. corporate taxes, and that includes the payroll taxes that are part of that taxing structure. So I'd say that if we can remove the taxes from productivity in America, we end up with a 28% marketing advantage for U.S.-made products over those made in foreign countries. To the gentleman from Georgia. And by the way, if I could say one more thing, is I would not have picked up a nice Georgia company like Coca-Cola to use them as an example. But then that's just me.
As Coca-Cola spread out all over the world, right? They happen to have their corporate headquarters in Atlanta, but for how long? We talk so much about trying to grow jobs in America. What about just trying to keep the jobs that we've got? What about just trying to make it a joy to do business in America instead of making it a hassle to do business in America? You may not believe this, Mr. Speaker, but this is a $10 haircut I just got over the weekend. You probably think I paid a lot more than that for this haircut. But as you think about what the gentleman from Iowa said about where cost is hidden, where taxes are hidden, I paid $10 for this haircut. But Derek, my barber, he had to pay 15.3% in self-employment taxes. So $1.50 of that $10 went straight to the federal government in self-employment taxes. Now, he's a good barber, so I suspect he's in higher than the 15% tax bracket. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, he's in the 15% income tax bracket. So he, out of my $10 haircut, he had to take $1.50 right off the bat, send it to the government in self-employment taxes. Then he had to take another $1.50 right off the bat and send it to the federal government in income taxes. So for the $10 haircut he charged me, he's only taken home $7 to feed his wife and kids. So is it a $10 haircut or is it a $7 haircut? What we tell Americans is, oh, we're going to lower your tax burden. But what we've done is to hide that tax burden in the cost of everything we buy. Because if Derek didn't have to pay those $3, he'd be charging me $7 for a haircut. And he'd still take $7 home to feed his kids. And to have an honest discussion about what kind of spending we ought to do in this place, I think we have to bring all of those hidden taxes out of price. Not only does it make us more competitive, as you suggested, but it makes it possible for us as Americans to have an honest discussion about, is government doing too little or is government doing too much? And I think, as you suggested, the studies suggest, it's about 22% of the cost of everything that we buy on average that is hidden taxes that we think we're getting away with, but that we're actually paying at the checkout counter.
I'd slip another anecdote into this. It comes from just last weekend. I was over in eastern Iowa doing an event, and I happened to get reacquainted with a young gentleman by the name of Michael Dix. Now, he is 13 years old, soon he'll be 14. But when he was 8 years old, I've told this story into the Congressional Record in the past, he saved up his money to go buy a little box of Skittles. And so he had his change counted out just right in his pocket, 89 cents for a box of Skittles, and had to reach up to the counter, I presume, and got his Skittles off the shelf and put them up on the counter, and he counted out his 89 cents, and the checker rang it up and said, "That'll be 96 cents. And he said, "But the price is 89 cents. And the checker said, "But you have to pay the tax." That's the sales tax in Iowa. "So that's 96 cents, young man." And he turned to his dad and he said, "Dad, I have to pay taxes on Skittles? What a painful experience for an 8-year-old young man." But think of what that means if our taxes are transparent. That young man is going to grow up to be a conservative. He's going to put fewer demands on government. He's going to demand one thing, less taxes, less services. We're going to want to have more personal and individual responsibility, and we're going to let people provide for their own security in a lot of ways and achieve on their own. That is a cultural transformation that comes if you have a transparent tax and if you take the tax and stop punishing productivity and put it on consumption. Gentlemen?
Well, I would say to my friend, you talk about cultural transformation. I would tell you that transformation is actually taking us back to that entrepreneurial, self-reliant experience that America began as a nation. This business of hiding taxes and trying to make people think they're getting something for nothing, that's a relatively new experience in American culture, and it has transformed this country. I'm big on saying you got to have skin in the game. To make good decisions, you have to have skin in the game. Right now, 50% of the American population isn't paying any income taxes. They don't think they have skin in the game. Now, they do because they're paying tax and all these hidden consumption opportunities that you and I are talking about, but they vote as if they're getting something for free. And as a nation, If we're going to make responsible decisions, particularly as it comes to borrowing from our children and our grandchildren, we have to let Americans know what are they really paying for the size and scope of government. And that's not to say they can't say, I understand how much I'm paying and I'm willing to pay even more, or I hate how much I'm paying and I'm going to pay less, but it will absolutely bring us away from a culture that believes there's a free lunch and back to a culture that understands that decisions have consequences and that there is no taxpayer in America except for we, the American consumers.
If the gentleman yield, history is replete with founding fathers, literary giants of the time, philosophers of the time, who continually they looked at the Greek democracy and they were appalled at what it had produced. They produced, say, for us, a republic instead. But many of them spoke eloquently about what happens when the public would realize that a majority of them could vote themselves benefits from the public treasury. Some of them said democracy ceases to exist. Some of them said that will destroy our republic. But I would guess that most of the people that were providing the wisdom at the time commented on their fear that this country would move towards a majority voting themselves benefits from the public treasury. And so that is one of the reasons that we have a republic instead of a democracy, is because those of us who are elected as representatives of the citizens of the republic are to have a higher responsibility than to listen to, let's say, people who want the fruits of someone else's labor and don't want to labor themselves. And so we're at this situation now where in the early part of this country there was a policy that you had to be a land-owning male in order of age and other qualifications in order to vote, because they wanted the public policy to be established by people that had skin in the game. And today we saw a constitutional amendment requiring a balanced budget fail here on the floor of the House of Representatives. I'd like to have seen a stronger one, but it failed here on the floor of the House. And that was the constitutional amendment with a cap at 18% of GDP and a supermajority to raise taxes, put some of that philosophy back in where it requires a supermajority to raise taxes. There's a restraint there that brings back some of that philosophy. It helps offset the disadvantage that the working American has today who's paying those taxes. Your barber is at a disadvantage because some of the hair that he cuts is of people that aren't working. I'd say at least one out of every 3 heads of hair that your barber cuts is somebody that is in that role of 100 million Americans of working age who are not in the workforce. Many of them are voting. They're voting themselves benefits from the public trough. And I'd suggest that we take the tax off of productivity in America, stop punishing production, put it over on consumption. And I'm just looking around for a bill number that I could attach myself to because I'm drawing a blank, and I'd yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
I thank my friend. You're absolutely right. When I talk to young people, I try to get out to the middle schools and high schools in my district every week when we have time back home. I say, I've got a $10 an hour job in my congressional office. Who wants to come to work for me? Who wants to come to work for me? And I've just gave a powerful presentation about how you can come here and return America to its foundational roots. So all the hands go up. And I say now, just to be clear, though, we're going to have to put a $9 income tax on that $10 an hour, so you're only going to be able to take home $1 at the end of the day. Now, who wants to come work 80 hours a week for me? And all the hands go down. The power to tax is the power to destroy. And we use that power here. I with all due respect to our colleagues on both sides of the aisle, the FairTax that I support and that you were such a strong supporter of, it has detractors on both sides of the aisle, because what the FairTax says is we're not going to manipulate your behavior through the tax code anymore, because the tax code allows us to say, if you buy wool sweaters, we're going to give you a tax credit. If you buy polyester sweaters, we're going to take taxes away from you. If you go out and buy Levi's jeans, we're going to give you a tax credit. If you go out and buy Lee jeans, we're going to take taxes away from you. Over and over and over again, we decide who's supposed to win and who's supposed to lose, and we punish or reward the American people and the American small business environment through the tax code. And what you and I have said in the FairTax is, I don't want that power in Washington. I give that power back to the American people. You choose what kind of jeans you want to wear. You choose what kind of sweater you want to buy. You choose whether you want a golf cart or not. We are not in the business of picking winners and losers. We're in the business of raising as little revenue as is necessary to run this federal government. And that takes power away from this body right here. And it is only those folks who believe that the American people are still smarter than you and I are who want to return that power, and I thank you for being my partner in that.
And I appreciate the opportunity to be your partner in this. And I would say to the folks on either side of this argument that disagree, they're both wrong, whether they're from the left or whether they're from the right. And here's the bottom line is this. The FairTax does everything good that anybody's tax proposal does that is good. It does them all, and it does them all better. And I'm happy to take that debate anywhere in this land, and that folks that'll try that on will finish second in that debate. And I quickly yield back because the gavel's in the air.